two, 1, 2, 3.
Hello and welcome to Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. I'm here today with Anisa Mendizabal. She is Community Development Planner with the Ithaca Urban Renewal Agency, usually just referred to as IURA. And we will talk about the IURA and affordable housing. Anisa Mendizabal, are you a city employee?
No, I'm not. I work very closely with the city, and we do have offices in City Hall that the city provides to us, but we are a separate agency. We're kind of nested within the planning department. People might think of us as kind of an in-house consulting group, but we are a separate public authority with our own rules and organizational structure.
And I think your salary, for instance, is funded how? From the city budget or?
No, it's funded from the IRA budget.
The IURA budget, which comes from?
There are various sources. I would say that probably the largest contribution to my salary is the administration lines that we get from our HUD entitlement funding, which for CDBG funds is up to 20% a year for the entire office to administer those funds, and up to 10% of the home award each year to administer those funds for the entire office. So not just my salary.
An entire office, I believe, of 3.5. 3.5. Oh,
yeah. We have a part-time accountant.
Oh, wow. Okay. When we say we need to develop more affordable housing, that money can come from various sources. You have alluded to one already, the federal government, Housing and Urban Development Department, HUD, and HUD funds 2 programs under the IURA. One is called HOME and one is called CDBG. HUD also funds the Ithaca Housing Authority that has public housing, and it funds housing choice vouchers, usually referred to as Section 8. Federal funding, in a kind of indirect way, also goes to low-income housing tax credits, often called LIHTC. And these are, however, administered through the state. The state itself can also fund housing, some of which it probably happens and I don't know about it. I've heard of a program called Mitchell-Lama and not much else. The advantage of both federal and state funding, by the way, is that that money comes out of graduated income taxes, taxes that are based on people's ability to pay. And that distinguishes them from all the other sources. Because, for instance, when local government contributes to housing, that is based on property taxes. And property taxes actually make people's housing more expensive. So there are some real local problems with the tax abatements that the Industrial Development Agency grants. I think there are also some county funds involved. And then a lot of money actually comes from private companies like the one that's building the Asteri apartment building. And private development of affordable housing is typically motivated by the federally funded, state-administered LIHTC. Other much smaller sources can be unions or private charities. So let's get back to the IURA. What are the IURA's programs?
So this might be a little confusing, so stick with me. I let everybody know at the beginning that I'm not a city employee, but the city of Ithaca does delegate to the Ithaca Urban Renewal Agency, for which I work, the task of administering the city of Ithaca's HUD entitlement funds. So we get two streams of funding from the federal government. You already mentioned them: HOME for affordable housing uses only, and then Community Development Block Grant Funding, CDBG, which one of the four uses can be affordable housing. So what entitlement funding means, what it means to be an entitlement community, is that the city of Ithaca has qualified via being an urbanized area with a high population in our area to be an entitlement community. Entitlement communities receive funding streams from HUD. Different communities have different streams. We only have two. I'm not exactly sure how they decide all of them, but we have two. And instead of having to reapply each year to receive those funds, the federal government, people at HUD, determine by formula how much money each community is going to get each year. And the formula depends on how much Congress has allocated to the various uses of HOME and CDBG, how big the community is that's receiving the funds. Bigger communities get more funding, and how many communities are in that pool of entitlement communities. So we joined that pool in 2004, and every year new communities join. So that's important to remember, because the amount of funding doesn't necessarily increase with the number of communities. All the funding goes into a pool and then it's divided among those communities. So, and I will say we're very, very fortunate to have this funding, because smaller communities like us, it's pretty rare now to be in the entitlement pool. And there actually was a proposal a few years ago to take small communities out of the entitlement pool, but that didn't pass and we stayed in. So that's a long explanation, but we administer these two HUD funding streams. And just as an asterisk to that, since the pandemic, HUD has Congress has given HUD some funding to help offset the major shockwaves that the pandemic caused in the housing market and other community development areas. So entitlement communities received special funds during that time. So we received some special community development block grant funding, which we're still using up. And we received a special one-time allocation of a new program, one-time program called HOME American Rescue Plan. And I can talk about those later. But we got these resources because we are an entitlement community.
So that's a good thing. And how much money are we talking about altogether?
Great question. And people can look on our website if they want to see actual amounts over the years. But generally, we receive about $1 million, a little less than $1 million with both streams combined. So this year we're anticipating, we don't know yet for sure how much we're going to get. So we have to kind of estimate and look back over records and how much funding we think is going to be available. We're anticipating to have about $622,000 in CDBG funds granted to us, allocated to us, and about $317,000 in HOME funds. So that's how much we have each year to work with on a variety of different projects. We usually fund about 15 projects or more.
Well, what could you build? How much housing could you build with $1 million?
So to build a standalone unit, estimates in our county from about a year ago were that with $1 million, you could build 2 to 4 standalone units. So we don't normally use all the funds to like build one house or 2 houses, though we do contribute. We have contributed to individual units like that. We usually, the funding usually goes to a variety of projects to help with, showing that there's community support. If applicants are also going to be applying to LIHTC funds, like the LIHTC competitive process that you mentioned, or it's part of other funding that will be put into a project. So I did a little bit of research, and from 2011 to 2019, we supported about 516 units, making them affordable in some way. So that could have included subsidizing a number of units in a large multifamily project, such as Founders Way. It could be assisting with minor repairs for low-income homeowners, or more major renovations for low-income homeowners, security deposits, and rehab of rental units that are out there to preserve them and make sure that they stay viable.
As is in the name, renewal.
Yes.
And where can this housing be built?
So when entitlement community receives its funding, those funds must be used in that community. So we can only support housing being built or rehabbed in the city limits of the city of Ithaca.
Okay, now that would mean the housing that you help to support would have to be located within the city limits, which are
Pretty
quite
much.
small.
That's very true.
Compared to,
yes,
you might say, the economic area.
yes.
But would the people who move into those units have to already live in the city of Ithaca?
Have to already, if they're moving into the units, no, as long as they establish, residency, they have to be low. They have to show that they're low or moderate income.
Okay.
Now, primarily, I would expect that people within the city of Ithaca are the ones that are moving into those. I've never heard of a giant influx from people from elsewhere. But if they weren't previously living in the city of Ithaca, they could potentially rent a house if they showed that they are low to moderate income. When I say house, I mean unit.
Unit, an apartment, likely, if they're low to moderate. Okay, I was wondering, because somebody who had IURA committee experience was saying, no, it's only 60%, but that had to do with services non-housing services provided.
So what I will say is, for things that are funded by CDBG funds, we have to ensure that over 70% of those funds benefit people who are low to moderate income, and that the majority of those funds also benefit people who live in the city of Ithaca. However, I think HUD understands, and we understand, that there might be, I'm just going to use a generic example, there might be an after-school program that happens where kids can come and get homework help, for example. And it's possible that, of the 30 students getting homework help on any given afternoon, a few of them live in the county. So our grantees that are receiving our money make sure that they understand how many people they're serving and where they live, so that they can show majority benefit goes to City of Ithaca residents. So does that kind of clear that up a little bit?
No, it makes a lot of sense, especially since the so-called Ithaca City School District has boundaries that have nothing to do with the municipal boundaries of the city of Ithaca. It's a much, much larger area. It includes just about the whole town of Enfield and just about the whole town of Caroline
Yeah, so
and Danby.
that's exactly why I chose that example. Also, something that's a little confusing too is Ithaca's zip code extends beyond the city of Ithaca.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it goes into the town, and so people may have an address that looks like the city, but we have to verify that it's within city limits.
Right. That is a problem in lots of places. I mean, lots of issues for lots of programs in this community.
Yeah.
People believe that they live in the city when they don't. And they come to city council meetings and they sound off and say
Yeah.
they live in the city.
I mean, you can kind of understand where the confusion is. And as you already mentioned, Theresa, we do have a very compact, small city. So, some people aren't always aware when they're crossing over into the town or into another municipality or jurisdiction.
Yeah. Well, I think this is late 19th century city limits mostly.
You could be right. You probably are.
Although there may have been a few changes since. Well, if someone thinks that the IURA could help their project, how do they reach you?
The best way to reach me is via email, and I'm sure you'll provide that. But because I have a complicated last name, but I will. Should I spell it right now?
Oh, sure.
Okay, first initial A, MENDIZABAL at cityofithaca.org. The City of Ithaca also provides our email addresses, which is very nice of them. But again, that's why people think we're city of employees. So that's the best way. People can also call one of two main numbers. The IURA main number is 607-274-6565. Or the planning department, who often helps us out, can help take a message as well. 607-274-6550 and ask for Anisa. If you leave a message, I will get back to you. But again, I will say that email is the best way to reach me.
Good. And do you have any idea about how much housing gets built with HUD assistance, and perhaps also how much, affordable housing gets built without HUD assistance in this, let's say, in the city?
Well, I will say two major projects, that one that's already come online and one that's going to be coming online, that you've already alluded to, have gone forward without any HUD assistance from IURA or the city's HUD entitlement funds. So that's both Vecino projects. So Art House, which opened, I believe, in 2020, during the pandemic anyway. That whole time's kind of a blur. And then Asteri Ithaca, which will be opening right there on the Commons, kind of behind City Hall. That is slated to open in springtime of 2024. I think they're looking at April, May opening now. And both of those, Art House has 120 units and Asteri has about 200. Those are being funded entirely through other funds that are not IURA funds. So that's a huge amount that's coming to our community without IURA funds. However, we have funded probably most of the help fund. We have put in funding. Most of the INHS multifamily units that people are familiar with, Breckenridge, Founders Way, 210 Hancock, they will, I believe INHS will be applying when they're ready to go forward with their new project that they're proposing on Inlet Island. So those have all been supported with some HUD funds. We've also supported Habitat for Humanity in rehabbing some local homes for low to moderate income home ownership. And also they built some new units around 3rd Street and Morris Ave several years ago now, but we help fund those. INHS sometimes builds new units for home ownership, affordable home ownership. So for example, there was 4 affordable townhomes that were built on Cayuga Street. There are some coming online in the next few years on Sears Street. So it's very, like I said, I quoted an earlier number from 2011 to 2019. We supported about 500 different types of affordable housing in Ithaca. So it's hard to break it down exactly. However, I will say that unrelated to that, I asked the city planning department how many units they had approved in the last 5 years for building, not all of it which went forward, but about, now I mentioned this in our last meeting together, and now I'm blanking out on it. I will say about a quarter of those units, the total number of units that they approved were affordable to people making less than 80% AMI, area median income.
Okay, so that's approved, not yet built necessarily.
It's approved. Some of it's been built. Some of it has not been
Yeah.
built. They don't
Okay.
have figures of which ones have actually been completed,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
I would say the majority have been completed.
Or nearly.
Yes.
Since we
yes.
have that huge Asteri
Yes,
project.
you're right. You're
that's
right. Yeah, that's a huge one.
Still months
Yes.
from completion.
Yes.
And actually, I think it ended up a little smaller than 200 units because
Yeah, that sounds right.
yeah, because Herald Square threatened the lawsuit against them, and they had to cut back, literally cut back, make the building a bit
correct.
smaller.
That sounds correct, but it's less than 200, but it's quite a bit larger than most of the other developments that we're familiar with.
Well, how do we know how much affordable housing is needed in the city?
That's a great question. Every 5 years, the city, IURA, on behalf of the city, undertakes the consolidated planning process, during which time we do a market analysis of housing trends in our area. I will say it's kind of using best available data. So we look at a variety of different plans. For example, Tompkins County, we look at, they have a housing snapshot that we're looking at. We look at other HUD provided data that's available for us to use. However, I will say the data usually lags by about 3 years. So they're not up to the minute figures, but they give us an estimate, and kind of we go forward based on that. However, and we all know that Ithaca has a complicated scenario because of our 2 major institutions of higher education, Cornell and Ithaca College. The students that are going to those colleges answer the census, and most students respond that their income would be in the low to moderate income band. So, but we also know that those students may be getting family support. So they're not trying to work full time or support themselves full time. And they're included in with the total number of Ithaca residents that are reporting. So, there's a lot of kind of different ways that we try to get at what the needs of the permanent population are, because we're seeing a lot of inflation, for example, over the last few years. We know that though people's incomes have risen, so has inflation, and it's harder for people to afford housing than it was even 5 years ago. So we look at a number of sources. We do our best to do a market analysis to help understand what's needed. But what I will say is, if you walk around or you're a person who's listening to this and live in the city of Ithaca, you know that people have trouble affording their housing, whether or not they are renting or trying to own a home. And that is by virtue of our very compact city with limited ability to, you know, kind of develop land. It's impacted by the fact that we have a large student population that needs to live here. It's impacted by, you know, the fact that a lot of people want to be here to take advantage of all the wonderful opportunities we have here. So we know and understand it is a very high cost market compared to other markets in upstate New York to try to live.
And you talked about various data sources, but I think you also talk to a lot of people.
We do. Yes, absolutely. That's a big part of the consolidated planning process. So we talk to area experts, we talk to community groups such as DSA who are interested in particular topics and have knowledge of particular topics. We talk to community members who want to talk to us. So again, I really encourage anybody who wants to talk to me about anything ranging from a project that you would like to see happen and you're wondering how you would do that. We can have a technical assistance meeting. Technical assistance is a fancy word for let's sit down and chat. You tell me what you'd like to do, and then I will do some research to see if that's possible within HUD regulations and for your timeline and what you want to accomplish. So that, but we also I love talking to community members or going to community meetings of, you know, groups or civic organizations, clubs, volunteer organizations, to both let them know kind of what we do, but also hear from them about what questions they have and what needs they've observed in the city. And that's a big part of the consolidated planning process.
So once again, Anisa Mendizabal, if someone thinks the IURA could help them, help their
Yep.
project, or if someone thinks they have information about housing for the next consolidated plan, how do they reach you?
I would love it if people could reach out to me via email, amendizabal@cityofithaca.org, or they can also call 607-274-6565 or 607-274-6550 to leave a message for me, and I will return their call.
Well, thank you, Anisa Mendizabal. This has been Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. Thanks for watching.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.